Hollywood loves to romanticize World War II, but the reality was far more brutal and complex. Today, we're separating fact from fiction, exposing the 10 biggest myths that Hollywood got wrong. To charge into enemy lines, most of them not even carrying a rifle.
Houston's men, fueled by the fire of freedom and knowledge of Emily's sacrifice.
We are men, Texans, and we will fight and die alongside our brothers if we have to.
Number 1. Hitler was solely responsible for Germany's defeat. This is one that I hear a lot, and it's easy to point the finger at one man. But the truth is, Hitler's actions, while undeniably disastrous, were only a small part of the story. Germany's defeat was a complex result of multiple factors. They lacked vital resources such as oil, food, and ammunition. And the Allies, with their superior industrial capacity, eventually completely overwhelmed the German forces with sheer numbers and cutting-edge technology for the time. Technology such as radar and code breaking, and resistance movements in occupied territory disrupted Germany's supply lines and tied down troops, making an absolutely huge difference in the outcome of the war. And let's not forget the brutality of the regime itself, which alienated it from potential allies and fueled the determination of the Allied forces. Number 2. Japan could have won by destroying Pearl Harbor's oil depots. It's tempting to think that a single blow could have changed the outcome of the war, but the truth is far more complex. While destroying the oil depots at Pearl Harbor would have caused a significant short-term shortage, the United States had a vastly superior industrial capacity compared to Japan. And don't forget that states like Texas existed, with its massive oil fields. America simply had so much oil that it could dig up that any disruption in the long term would have been a minor disruption at best. And let's be real, even if Japan had managed to prolong the war, their long-term aspects remain bleak. Their limited resources, industrial capacity, and dwindling manpower would have eventually led to their defeat.
Number 3. A single turning point decided the war.
This is a very common trope used in movies. A single epic battle that determines the fate of the world. But history is never as tidy as that. Every battle, from the Battle of Midway to the D-Day landings, played a significant role. Think of it like a chain of events. Each event set in motion the next, and 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 eventually led to the Allied victory. Basically, they gave an inch and the Allies took a mile.
Number 4. Allied victory was purely due to overwhelming resources.
Sure, resources played a huge role, but don't underestimate the power of strategic reasoning and leadership. Allied commanders had to make tough choices, allocating resources and prioritizing battlefields, and navigating the complexities of a global conflict. I mean, this was no small feat. Their skill and vision was just as important as any amount of tanks and planes. Imagine if they had all of those resources and they were led by a guy like Napoleon. No, not that Napoleon, this Napoleon.
The Soviets used human wave tactics.
Okay, so there actually is a little bit of truth to this one, but it isn't exactly what you see in movies. In fact, it is far more tragic than that. While they did use human wave tactics in World War II, most of the time when you hear about this, it is not what you see in the movies. It is not a bunch of trained soldiers bravely charging forward, their guns held high, charging into battle, and explosions happening all around them. Most of the time, it was really unfortunate factory workers and Russian civilians that were put at gunpoint by the Russian military and charged headfirst into enemy lines, carrying absolutely no equipment and most of the time not even carrying a rifle. And there's accounts of civilians linking arms together and charging forwards into enemy lines, just getting completely mowed down. Basically, the Russian military used its own civilians and factory workers as a big human shield. What's up, y'all? If y'all are liking the video so far, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get back to it.
Number 6. The atomic bombs are the one and only reason why we won the war.
Alright, so this is a highly debated topic, as many of you pointed out in my short. The atomic bomb is the one and only reason why we won the war. I hear that so often, and it is not actually the one single-handed only reason why we won the war. It really did speed things up, and it saved countless lives. Japan was already on the brink of surrender, and they had been pushed all the way back to their homeland. And things like the Operation Meeting House bombings actually killed far more people than either of the atomic bombings of Nagasaki or Hiroshima. And it stands today as the deadliest raid in history. With Germany's defeat, all eyes were on Japan. All the allies, including Russia, were now about to start rushing towards Japan, and we were going to overwhelm them with superior numbers and firepower. But, as we know, none of that happened. Japan was not just going to sit by and surrender their homeland freely. They were going to fight to the very last man, woman, and child. So the atomic bombs really sped up the end of the war, but it was going to happen one way or another.
Number 7. Hitler escaped to Argentina.
Okay, you got me. This one's not actually a myth, but I thought it was fun and I wanted to include it in this thing anyway. And I've heard a lot of people talk about this. Despite persistent rumors, there is absolutely no credible evidence that Hitler escaped to Argentina. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Forensic analysts and historical records confirm Hitler's death in 1945. Multiple witnesses, including those that were in the bunker, describe Hitler's last moments and the subsequent burning of him and Eva's bodies. The Soviets conducted thorough investigations and the remains found in the bunker, concluding that they were indeed Hitler's. And most importantly, recent forensic analysts of a skull believed to be Hitler's confirmed that he died by his own hands.
Number 8. All Germans were bad people and supported their dictator.
Now, this might be one of the most common ones, but the regime was absolutely brutal. You have to remember that. But not all Germans were completely complicit. Resistance groups existed throughout Germany, risking their lives to oppose the ideology and fight for freedom. The movements encompassed a diverse range of individuals and groups, including communist, socialist, religious figures, intellectuals, and military officers, and ordinary citizens who opposed the regime's policies and ideologies. Resistance groups took various forms, from disrupting anti-regime propaganda and providing aid to prosecuted groups in acts of sabotage, and a bunch of assassination attempts. Some notable examples include the White Rose Student Group and the Red Orchestra Intelligence Network. However, these resistance groups were met with brutal repression from the regime. Many resistors were arrested, tortured, and eventually executed, making it extremely difficult for any organization to maintain a lasting and strong resistance.
Number 9. All Japanese Americans were put into intern camps.
This is a common misconception. While intern camps were a dark chapter in America's history, not all Japanese Americans were sent to these internment camps. Many were put under house arrest, and internments were primarily focused on the West Coast, and there were only about 10 internment camps, and all of them were on the West states. Now, I did a lot of research, and I can't find a lot of reasoning for this. The only thing that I can really find is that the Japanese Americans were mostly populated over there on the West Side and the West Coast, and Japanese Americans just weren't very densely populated on the East Coast, and it was much harder to put them into camps.
And the biggest myth on today's list, number 10. Germany killed the most people during World War II.
Alright guys, this one has been far overlooked for far too long, and someone needs to point this out eventually. Now, this is where things get a little bit complicated, because depending on how far you want to go back and how you want to count things and when you want to start counting them, changes the answer of number 10. While Germany is responsible for the deaths of around 12 to 14 million Jews, he did not actually kill the most innocent people during the war. That record either belongs to Stalin or Hirohito. So like I said, depending on how you want to count it, it was either Japan or Russia that killed the most people during the war. Russia's human wave tactics killed a lot of civilians in Russia and is responsible for the deaths of millions and millions of people. However, by count, Japan is responsible for the deaths of around 30 million people during the war, with 20 million of those people being innocent civilians. They showed absolutely no mercy during their brutal occupation of the Chinese homeland. And because of that, I'm ranking them as number 1 of having killed the most people during the war. So there you have it, guys. There's 10 Hollywood misconceptions about World War II. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time.